Welcome to Business Beyond the Mic, where we join Carly Van Heerden, CEO and founder of We Edit Podcasts. Together, let's uncover the art of podcasting.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Business Beyond the Mic. I'm your host, Carly Van Heerden. Today on the show, we welcome Lauren Teague. Lauren is the host of the Brands to Fans podcast and knows that the secret to building a great business is cultivating fandom rather than followers. She is a sought-after business strategist, an acclaimed speaker, and founder of the re-commerce startup FANWAGN. As an original sports social media lead, Lauren spent 7 seasons as the voice of the PGA Tour and transformed how professional golf connects with fans online. She's the only strategist anywhere with a client list this diverse, including retail brands like Cabela's and TaylorMade, tourism hotspots like the Grand Ole Opry and Tourism Alberta, and technology giants like SAP and Cisco, just to name a few. Lauren's entrepreneurial endeavors are powered by collaboration, from working as a consultant to co-producing Sports PR Summit, co-hosting the Mom Buns podcast, and even as the president of her children's co-op preschool. In her remaining free time, she is president of the National Speakers Association Oregon chapter and active in Women in Sports and Entertainment and the Canby Area Chamber of Commerce. During our conversation, we dig into Lauren's podcasting journey and why she decided to launch her show even before launching her business. In fact, she shares with us the concept of using your podcast to brand yourself as a thought leader in your industry, especially when you're making a career pivot. Lauren is an absolute expert on fostering fandom, not only when it comes to your business, but also when it comes to your podcast. In fact, she reminds us that attention is fleeting and affinity is lasting, and building your brand affinity is what you should put your sights on. This episode is absolutely jam-packed with great advice, and Lauren shares her superpower when it comes to podcasting and how completely elevated her show. So without further ado, let's get into it. Lauren, welcome to Business Beyond the Mic. It is so great to have you on the show today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm a new listener because the podcast is still relatively new, and I've enjoyed the episode so far. So just honored to be a guest.
Oh, well, it's going to be amazing to have your story sharing it with our listeners. So I'm excited to get into everything. But why don't you start us off by just telling us a bit more about yourself, your business, your brand, and of course, your podcast?
Well, my business it changed in 2023. I have been a longtime social media brand manager turned consultant, turned speaker, and now kind of living in between those things. I added startup founder to my plate this year as well, and officially got back into podcasting as well. So I speak, teach, talk, pod about fandom and how actionable affinity sets beloved brands apart from the rest. So everything that I do is geared towards building fans, not followers, of a brand, an organization, or a person, or a cause, and how that works from the inside and the out. So I believe that fandom is such a powerful tool that we can actually use it inside our businesses and organizations to create fans from our employees, to then create more stories to tell and invite others to join in that experience, as well as creating fans outside your organization. And then a lot of the times that looks like people ask like, well, how did you do that in social media? How do I do that with content? How do I do that with brand experience and offline and online and things like that? So I've always had this thesis that fandom built brands and were the best brands. And so this year I just kind of went all in on that. And so I actually have the podcast is called Brand to Fan Show, and that launched in February 2023. And we're at 30-ish episodes right now, which is awesome. And then my keynotes and my speaking and training is in the fandom vein. And then I started a startup company called FANWAGN, and that is a resale marketplace for sports and college enthusiasts to resell their fan apparel. So their jerseys, hats, t-shirts, shorts, pet clothes, like pet jerseys and costumes and things like that too. So there's a resale marketplace dedicated to that. So I'm all in on fandom. And that's really been a huge pivot for me in 2023. And it's been awesome to bring the podcast along as part of that.
Wow. No, that's amazing. And I love that you call it fans. And we're so inundated with you have to have followers, you have to do all the things. But there's such a huge difference between that, because I know you always say that attention is fleeting, but affinity is where it's really you have to build it step by step to get to those fans for your business. So it's amazing to hear that perspective and digging into your story that way. So I know we were chatting before and you said that you launched your podcast before you actually went into this entrepreneurship way. And I mean, you were working on your business.
Yep.
So what inspired you to do that launch initially and, bring it into the world?
I actually went to a founder entrepreneurial kind of women bosses meetup, whatever it's called. And it was local to me. So in the Salem, Oregon area. And it was a collection of 4 or 5 entrepreneurs who had their own mastermind. And they decided to do kind of a public roundtable or panel event as part of day 1 or day 0 of their own mastermind retreat, which I thought was brilliant. And in the conversations, I knew 1 or 2 of the ladies who were on the panel. So I had been following their work, had been associated with them for a while. And while listening to the panel, they all talked about what a great vehicle podcasting is to get your ideas into the world, get validation, build audience, all of these things. And I just kind of sat back and was like, wow, it's been such a missed opportunity for me in this business. And I just thought this is the thing. This is the thing that I need to do to really put ideas of my own into the world and let people know kind of where I live and create some separation between Lauren Teague, PGA Tour social media lead, and Lauren Teague, consultant with Convince and Convert, which were 2 past lives that I'm very proud of. But I'm also going into Lauren Teague, founder of FANWAGN and keynote speaker. And I wanted to put this hypothesis that I've had for more than 15 years into the world. And I thought, what a better way to there's podcasting is such a great way to kind of demonstrate the journey of what something is. And Mark Schaefer, who has written several books, including Known, I had a conversation with him once, and he reminded me that you don't have to be at the end. You don't have to have all the answers in order to start sharing. You can share the journey of figuring out the answers. If you have a hypothesis, if you have a question, if you have something that you would like to be known for, you don't have to be the expert before you start sharing.
Right.
And I thought that came to mind as well. And I thought, you know what? I've had this hypothesis. I've proven it out over 15 years of brand experience and management and social media and consulting. And I know this works. And so what if I took the podcast and took some of my favorite people that I know who are both or experts or business leaders or speakers or startup founders or, kind of from all these different walks of life and test, let's talk about how fandom and affinity works in your business. And let's kind of capture those stories and let me ask them questions of how this might work. And so that's really how the podcast was developed. And I left that one event, was late August 2022. I immediately called my assistant and I was like, get out the notepad, right? Write this all down. Cause I was driving home and I was like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a podcast. It's called The Brand Fan Show. I could just rattle it off. It's going to be this, this, and this. And so we wrote kind of that overview, that positioning, and I was able to start booking interviews a few weeks later. And we did the majority of the interviews, I think between December 22 to January 23, so that when we launched in February, I had 8 or 10 done, maybe more, maybe 12 done. I mean, I think I podcasted every day in January. It felt which made me really that learning curve went really fast for how do I interview? What's my style? How am I going to pull questions together? What kind of research? How much research do I need? All of those kinds of things. And then to kind of figure out where the show could be uniquely mine. And I think I'm still, in some respects, still kind of growing in that way, but getting to kind of do it all at once or that first part of it, like be really concentrated in that time of figuring out the podcast, really helped kind of put my own stamp on it from the beginning. And so I really, really appreciate that. So, I actually did a podcast a few years ago with one of my best friends from college, and it's more parenting and mom life. And that one's called Mom Buns. And we had such a great time. It just fizzled during the pandemic because of personal things that were happening in her family and in my family. And just wasn't a good time for us to kind of put that on air. So podcasting wasn't new to me, but this part of podcasting, like it's my brand, it's my business. And I'm trying to build thought leadership and build in a more strategic way with my podcast. That part is more new to me.
Yeah. But it sounds like absolute ideal timing because you were in a pivot with your business and everything going. So your mindset was already going that way. And it was like, yes, I know exactly this is what's supposed to happen. This is how I'm going to do it. And yeah, it's like you said, it's fine to be not 100% ready, be able to sit in that season of experimenting, learning curve, exactly like you said. The same thing happened with me. Like I was doing 5 interviews a week and people were looking at me like, what are you doing? That's crazy amount. And I'm like, but I need to learn. I need to do this. I need to figure it out. And I feel like I've learned something that people take months to learn because they're doing it so spread out. Mine, it happened in a week or two, right? I'm just soared right up there. So yeah, it's encouraging to know there are people in the trenches doing the same thing. But yeah, so while we're working on launching this podcast, you're pivoting, what kind of obstacles did you face before you put it out into the world to make sure it was, your stamp on it?
I think we postponed the launch date, like at least I know for sure once, definitely once. It could have been twice. Just kind of, and I know why. So it happened. We were gonna we earmarked early February to go, and I was like, okay, we're gonna launch on our podcast is gonna come out on Tuesdays, and we were setting kind of the process and the systems for getting the content out. So what did it look like? Where were we going to support it? What online channels? What, how that was going to work. And then end of January, I did a speaker lab version, like a speaking lab, kind of workshop with some friends and speaker friends. And I was like, I feel like things are really good in the pod. And I just wish I had a better close. Like I had a better way to tie it all together. I just feel like I don't know what to say at the end. And so we workshopped a few things and they gave me some ideas for both how to go in. This was a workshop on transitions for speakers. So it was like the perfect time to do this. And so we workshopped well, how do you bring people into the episode? Well, what if you shared more about why someone's on the show or what question they're answering with you or what part of your journey are you bringing this to, why are you bringing this person at this time to talk about this thing? And I was like, oh, that's really good. Because most of the time we just get on a pod and we're like, oh, I'm so excited to talk to Carly and it's going to be so great. And nobody really knows why. They're like, we don't know who this person is, but we trust you as the host. Right. And so I realized if I could frame up, here's a question I have about fandom. And here's a person who's well suited to answer that. And here's how I know this person. And so today, we're going to set kind of a hypothesis for the episode.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, that makes total sense. And then we talked about the end, and the end was I've created now what I call the TLDL moment. And that is the too long, didn't listen. Which I thought when I started, I was like, 30 minutes is plenty of time for a podcast. Like who listens to podcasts beyond 30 minutes? I can't get out of a conversation in less than 42 minutes. I physically cannot cut someone off and get to all the things that we want to talk about. So it's okay, these are getting a little bit longer. How do I make sure? And one of my real-time consulting superpowers is to be able to listen, take notes, and regurgitate like immediate, like within the conversation. And I was already doing that part. I was already taking notes and kind of doing that. And then so in this work, when we were workshopping that, they're like, how could you tie that back? And I was like, I could probably like quickly summarize the key points and the takeaways from what we talked about without having to like record it after, and which is fine if that's what you have to do, but I don't have to. And so I was like, well, I guess I could try that. And that was like, in January, I'm still like creating all these episodes. And so I just started, and you can tell it's like, I think between like episode 5 and 6 or 6 and 7. And you can hear it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are fine. They're good episodes. They're great people, great interviews. When I started doing the TLDL, it sounds a lot more like me. And it is, and I remember doing it with Anne Handley, who is like the godmother of content marketing. And she's like one of the best speakers, people, authors, writers, like in the digital marketing landscape. And there's not a lot that I could probably do to impress her. And I did it in our interview. And I said, let me just sum this up in the TLDL minute. And I did this. And it was like, took me like 75 seconds. And I said, so what'd you think? And she goes, wow, I don't think I could do that. And I was like, you're going to make Anne Handley say, wow, like that is like, keep doing that thing.
Yes.
Right. And so then it's one of my favorite parts, to be able to do it, to be able to like summarize what's important, to do it in real time. And again, it is my superpower. It's not something that everybody's going to be able to do. And so for that reason, like I need to do it. And I'm trying to get better at, but like when we pull the video clips, that's the first one I cut.
Yep.
It's the first one. It's like the trailer for the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And that part becomes, like then that's uniquely mine. And that's a part of the episode that I get to use for promotion and publishing and put it on YouTube. So somebody is like, I don't want to listen to Lauren talk for 50 minutes with anybody, but I want to hear what they talked about. It's a really great way to do it in a way that like signals like, oh, if you work with her or if you have a call with her, she's paying attention. She takes great notes. She can tell you what she said, like on my own autorate.ai. So, but that's like when you go back to like, what was one of those like pivot points or obstacles? Because I figured that out when I had recorded like 6 episodes, but not all 12. Like that was like, okay, how do I integrate that? Can we just start it? How does that happen? And so that was one. The other was taking a summer hiatus because I didn't necessarily plan to do it, but it became really clear that with 3 kids at home and like and a summer schedule, and plus people are gone, it's harder to book interviews and things. And I was like, you know what? We're just going to take a summer hiatus. Yeah. And we came right back. Like literally we resumed episodes the day my kids went back to school, and it was fine. It was fine.
Yeah.
So.
No, I love that because it's totally your superpower and you just leaned right into it and it's put your personal stamp on it completely, like no questions asked. And I wish I had somebody to do that for all my episodes. I feel like I still do that, but I'm so enthralled in the conversation that my afterthought comes later. Like I've interviewed a few people too that they say, they really have to soak in the episode. That's kind of their process. And I feel like once you figure out what your process is, it makes it so much easier though. But honestly.
Yeah, whatever it is. And then like, and then writing that down or like coming back to it. Cause now we have SOPs or processes for every part of the podcasting public like process, which I know like as someone who does this for clients, like you also have your SOPs of like how it looks to like set an interview, how it looks to get the files, where the files go, like what tools you're using. And so we've just been really good at refining those pieces along the way so that we can actually like time them, like what are deadlines, like what are the things that we're, trying to do. And so we can actually work ahead, which is a gift.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And that's the thing. You don't know it until you're in it. So for me too, obviously I knew the post-production process really well and that's streamlined to the T, but I had to figure out what's my like what's all the things that I have to get done so my team can work efficiently on it. And it was a whole new journey for me to learn as well. But yeah, great to hear everybody's stories on this. And just encouraging people to, figure it out. It's okay. You can figure it out 6 episodes in, however many episodes in, pivot, make it better for yourself. And you're going to be more authentic in the end too, because you're going to do what works for you. And it's not just somebody else's idea of a podcast. So
I was listening to Strike Force 5, which is
Oh,
the late night
yes,
shows,
yes, yes.
right? Because like when you do podcasts, that's all you listen to. And they were talking about one of their very first episodes was talking about their first shows on late night TV. And one of the takeaways I had from that was somebody's producer had told them it's it's not really your show. It'll take 18 months to get it to be your show. And these late night hosts are on 5 nights a week for 9 months a year, right? So that's basically like 2 years
Mm.
of full time before it's going to feel like it's yours. And I was like, wow, I wonder what the podcast equivalent to that is. Because I
Yeah.
don't work 5 days a week on my podcast. I
No.
don't interview 5 days a week. Like, so is that my 10,000 hours is going to take long, even
Yeah,
longer?
yeah.
Or if, like, are certain things it's a 30-minute show, not an hour, like what becomes. And so I was just like, the thought that it's never really done.
Yeah.
And I think with today, like the technology and the tools and even people's attention spans, like I don't listen to some of the most popular podcasts out there because I don't have 3 hours a day to sit and listen to like Dax Shepard
Yeah.
talk. Like I don't. And I like it. I love his podcast, but I'm not gonna turn it on. I'm going to listen to like the 8-minute. I'm going to listen to more 8-minute
Mm.
episodes than I am like 2-hour episodes. And that's just because of how I can consume things in my day to day.
Yeah.
So,
And that's super personal because the same with me. I'm a mom too, and it's busy. Life gets hard. You don't have time to listen to hours and hours on things, but I love the cliff notes of everything. Like,
yeah,
give me a
exactly.
cliff notes, I'm in there. But yeah, but along with all of these like interesting learning curves and things, were there surprising benefits that you had from launching your show?
Yeah. I mean, certainly there were like strategic benefits, like let's get this idea into the world so I can be more known for this topic and less for the things that people knew me about. So like it was that was an opportunity and an advantage to like reposition my personal brand as I went out on my own. I also put FANWAGN as a brand new company, as a startup, uh, into the reads, right? The Branded Fan Show is presented by FANWAGN. Like I had my own sponsor, which is not financially lucrative, but it's lucrative in the way that I was able to like, have some assets and have some ways to do this. Like if you're a business, it also allowed me to, even the people who I'm interviewing, many of them were in my personal network or now have been in invitations through the network. Well, some of these people I hadn't really talked to since
Yeah.
COVID. And since it's a new business idea, to just spend an hour with somebody and like in that catch up time, like, oh, what are you up to? How are your kids? Da, 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 what are you doing? And I could say like, "Oh my gosh, I started a new thing." Right? And so let me tell you, like, give you the quick pitch on that. Well, that's so great. I can't wait to help you. I can't wait to amplify that for you.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like those strategic relationships that you get to build. And then the invitation. So like for me as a founder and as someone who's building a personal brand, like there are tons of intangible benefits, but it also allows me to like anchor my content, my personal social media content, my personal email, right? I have an email list
Yeah.
and I didn't feel like I had a lot to value, like to consistently give to them. And I was never good at building like a weekly digest or something like that. Now I have a weekly email program. I built and it's centered around the podcast. And now in this fall season that we're in, I took like, okay, how do I make that email more even actionable, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so like now I have, if you get the email, you get, here are 3 questions or steps to take what contents from the podcast, what the learning is from the podcast, and put it into play in your business. So whether you reflect over them, these questions with coffee, or you sit down with your team and you ask them on a Friday afternoon, like, or in a team meeting, like, and you actually bring that to your team, I'm giving the tools to do that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, and so that's kind of fun is like I can anchor that. I built a LinkedIn newsletter
Mm.
that takes some of that content. So my website has regular content. My LinkedIn newsletter is building subscribers. My email has regular content. My social media profiles are more consistent. So like there's a ton of intangibles that are just helpful because I took the step to just, I'm investing in building a podcast and I'm trying to leave like no stones unturned to make sure that this, which I feel is a great idea, gets out into the world in a way that is really actionable
Yeah.
because that's how when you go back to like what's the idea? Well, actionable affinity. So It can't just be like people like, oh, I like the podcast. I want the podcast to help you like get a new job, get a raise, like do something different at work, like build a growth focused organization. Like, so that's to me how it becomes like, it has to be actionable and it has to be presented in a way that people can get it where they want to and take, and fall in love with it over time.
Yeah. And I love that because you were talking, I heard about your one interview on the Courageous podcast, and he was talking also about fandom and why it's actually like, you fall in love with it. It's like a love story of some sort. And when people feel that way about your podcast, because you are helping them, you're teaching them, you're creating a platform where they can come and get those actionable steps that actually help them in their business, it makes a whole difference versus just somebody telling a story. I mean, obviously there's entertainment too. There's a place for that. But if it's not aligned with your business, then it doesn't help you, expand your brand and grow and put out that content that's really going to pull people in and find the tools that they need. So yeah, that's amazing.
Even when we were doing mom buns as like two moms going through it, like, yes, we were recording like our weekly, like, fests with each other, but we were doing it from a place of like, how do we help other moms get through this season? Like, whether you're traveling with two kids to like a different continent or you're just trying to beat some baby blues, you're trying to figure out how to talk to your mom or your husband or like, so we always kind of came at it from like, if we're having this, then somebody else is having this too. So it's not just like a bitch sesh, sorry, but it's also like, but it is like constructive in some way. Right. And so that like when that, and if I could, we've been talking about bringing back the mom buns with like more moms, which I think would be great, but we would do it from a place of like helping people based on our experiences.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing that gets shared so much between me and my mom friends. It's just like all of these funny instances of things that happen in your real life. But we also want advice on like, so what do you do when that happens? Like, I mean, the funny things are you just give up and there's no answer, but truly there is. Like, that's before I had kids, that's what I researched the most. The things that I wanted to know, I went out and found those people who give you actionable tips and things that you can at least try, give you some kind of something to stand on. I'll be excited to hear your mom buns if you'd bring it back.
It's still out there. It's still like the original is still very good. But bringing it back with a couple more moms who I keep telling them, I'm like, I am the least interesting of all four of us. So, and I like, people think my stories are pretty good. So if I'm the least interesting, like this would be a winning podcast. We definitely have to do it. We just have to find like, the time to like four moms actually have time to do it between work and all the practices and all the shuttling around and all of that. So
yeah, there's a new one out called After Dark. And I'm like, that's pretty much when you have any time. It's when the kids are done.
6 a.m. or after dark.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. Well, you've had such a unique approach to this. And when you are putting out this podcast content, I love that you said that you find like a hypothesis. This is what you want to solve, with this episode, with this expert that you have on. And then how do you tailor that to your audience? Like what do they want to expect from you? What have they come to expect from you? And then how do you know if it's hitting home, if it's resonating with them?
Those are really good questions. Selfishly, I am kind of my own audience. And I know I heard Brittany talk about this on your show too, Brittany Hodak. And we talk about very similar things from completely different angles, which is a lot of fun.
Amazing.
But I think she mentioned that Rory Baden was talking about kind of your audience is like who you used to be. And I've heard that from Rory a lot too. And so for me, it's like, okay, who is my audience? Well, I'm pretty multifaceted and I've come from a lot of things. So it was really easy to, at the start, to be like, you know what? I think it's for marketers. And then very quickly, I had my founder's hat on, like while I was asking those questions. And I was thinking about what does this look like as I'm literally starting a new business and I'm creating a new culture and a new way to do this. And so then I was like, well, maybe it's for marketers and entrepreneurs. And I've gotten more refined on that. So now if somebody asks, I say, well, it's for growth focused leaders. Yes. So it could be someone who's in a growth organization opportunity, but it's also someone who is like looking to make change and looking to scale their marketing team, whether it's from 1 to 2 or, from 6 to 12 or, whatever, and like scaling a business or growing a business in some way. I think that there has to be like, it's both a personality or mindset along with kind of a role.
Yeah.
And I know that's not because of who's told me that they've listened. Like a lot of the people that have told me that they've listened don't fit into that demo either. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's see. But I think if I keep coming at it from like who I am, and there are people who are like me that have been marketing and in communications and as a business owner, it's okay that if I wear kind of those hats together, because I can kind of hit all 3 of those in one episode, right? Like this question is kind of what this hat on. This question is, I can see how, and you can hear me in my podcast say like, oh man, I've been thinking about this way, but if I actually think about it from as a founder and like when I might approach that or when that's going to become important to me as a founder. So I'm actually like calling that out for certain people to do that. So that part is, like I have kind of tried to take it's for everybody and really narrow it into it is like, and I think these are the people that will get the most value from it.
Yeah. Man, it's true because they are multifaceted. I mean, every one of us as a listener, I mean, like you say, you have different hats on all the time, and recognizing that if you touch on the bases of all those that you think are listening, that's where you're really going to resonate. And it's the same that I've heard you talk about your business too. You actually have 2 separate audiences that you're marketing to because you've got the sellers and the buyers in there. So, I mean, it's the same tools that you're using in your everyday business that you're using now when you're communicating to your audience and finding things that will, touch points with them, yeah, that's great to think about it that way. But then, so when you are moving forward with your podcast and like you mentioned that you are your own sponsor, what does it look like when you actually monetize that? And what are your thoughts and your future plans for your podcast in the monetization side of things?
That's a good question. I think the word I'm looking for is strategic sponsor. So maybe FANWAGN is strategic in some ways, but I have gotten to the point where it's like, you know what? I need to take the next step on this. I need to really dive into audience metrics and growth because I've been watching it. And I've actually kind of come up on like, do I trust the metrics? Do I trust what people are telling me? Right? Do I trust the clicks and things, or do I trust? And so I'm like trying to figure that part out. And then also to say, I'm happy to step aside or like keep FANWAGN as a side, but also like find a company who is interested in reaching these people. And because I know that the reach of the podcast goes far beyond downloads, and downloads is also an arbitrary number because downloads doesn't mean listens, and and so these things, and so I'm like, okay, but I can say like, I know how many people get the email, I know how many people get the LinkedIn, I know how many page views I'm getting, and so I can kind of roll a different number. I know how many people I'm talking to from stage when I'm talking to like in an audience, right? And I can and I mention it, right? So because I'm a multifaceted creator, like sponsoring the podcast is like an extension of sponsoring me. And so like, what does that look like? Right. Is there a company that wants to line up and do a strategic sponsorship with me? And this is one of the things that they get. That's kind of how I'm like, would love to monetize it in the future. I don't know that that's, I'll probably have to work pretty hard to find that right fit just because of like all the things that I do. It's not like a golf company is like, hey, you know what? Like, because this may like it could, but no. So I'm trying to figure that out. In the meantime, like building brand awareness for FANWAGN is important. So it stays in there. And then I did put in an affiliate link that is a tool that I use with the podcast all of the time.
Yeah.
And so that also is like, do people listen and also want to make quick videos using AI? Like, the crossover there is not huge, but it's helped. And I can also then go back to that company and say like, okay, like here's what we've done. And do you want to kick in more? Or I'm going to take it off unless like we can come to some sort of terms to do that. And then I've monetized, honestly, I've monetized the process of having the podcast and what I've learned from that. I've monetized, like I've written a blog post on my site is 5 ways that I use AI and automation to help me with every podcast. It's one of like the most traffic pages on my site this year. Because I can just, when people are trying to figure out how do I do this or how do I use AI, I was like, I wrote down my whole process.
Yeah.
And so here it is. And then because of what we're doing with AI to kind of get the show out every week, between the tools and how that's integrated in my SOPs, actually built a talk. And I'm giving the talk to content marketing and other like other marketers and things like that. So I have like a course and a workshop talk and like other ways that I can do that. So for me, like monetizing the podcast actually is like maybe the smallest opportunity that I can offer somebody compared to all these other things.
And that's been such a common denominator amongst most of my guests. It's not necessarily the podcast itself. It's everything that flows from it that you are able to monetize, create new opportunities for yourself. That's just the main thing of it. It doesn't have to be just your podcast. It's about, at the end of the day, it's about your business too, right? It's about what you're growing. And the great thing about your business is you are still going to learn a lot of things along the way too, because, and as new things come on, then it's like, hey, this aligns better. Or so it doesn't mean like you have to choose today what you're going to monetize with. It's just goes with your journey, figure out along the way, and then see what works then and see what works for you down the line. And that's why like dynamic ads and all those things are so great, because it can change as your business changes, as your needs changes, as, you know, whatever your direction is pivots. So yeah, I love that. That's great. That's great advice there. Yeah.
And I didn't even mention like, the speaking leads that come from the, from hearing me on the podcast or, or the client leads, things like that. Like that's, attributed. There's a touch there, obviously, to do that too. So to say like, we did a whole podcast episode about your industry, or I did one for meeting planners, right? Like a whole episode about event planning.
Yeah.
And now I just PS that in every, as like a value add for like, hey, I'd love to work with you. And also, did you like, here's a great episode from my podcast that like might be helpful for you as you're thinking about your whole event experience and what like we talk about, how it can apply even before I was to get on stage.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I always say it's like an archive of all the helpful tools that you have right in your bank right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Well, we've gotten to the point of the interview where I want to do the quick fire 4 questions. And it's just kind of fun to, get our brains thinking. And so answer first thing that pops to mind, or you can expand whatever you feel. So let's take it away. The first question is, how has podcasting changed the way you do business and or life?
Ooh. I think that consistency and the courage to put my own ideas into the world has been like the biggest change for me this year. Again, I've been sitting on the brand of fan idea for 15 years, trying to prove it out in my whole career. And now I feel like I've got the bank of work, and now I'm capturing the stories and the validation and some of the proof. And this is just the start of, this becomes the basis for the book that I will write in the next couple years and that kind of thing. So I think like both like the consistency of getting to do it, and then the courage to say like, my idea is good enough to stand along other good ideas in different ways. So yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it. What would you say are your top 3 tools or like a non-negotiable investment for your podcast?
I still want to be involved. Like I'm not like waiting for someone to find the guest, schedule the recording. I show up in an interview and like, I don't touch it. I still like to be really involved because I feel like it's me.
Yeah.
The second non-negotiable is I also can't do everything alone. So whether it's I have an audio engineer, I have an operations team, and I use AI tools to help do that. And the third one is I'm not married to anything in the podcast yet, right? Like I can change the delivery date if I wanted to test that. I can change when an email or something goes. I can change kind of what content we clip. I can change how long, even just, I just started doing, I was like, we'll go bi-weekly and through the end of the year because there's so much content that I can get from any podcast episode. I don't need a weekly episode necessarily, Well, the first week I tried to do that, I like woke up with an idea I couldn't put down. And so I just came in and I recorded a 12-minute episode
Nice.
by myself. And it was something that I had like planned with or like wanted to play around with anyways. But I was like, here's a topic and so like, let's just go do that thing. And
Yeah.
so maybe I'll start alternating or throw some of those in on a regular basis. That's a self episode. So I'm not married to anything there, but I'm still pretty hands-on.
Mm. I'm always super interested to see the metrics on those episodes, like
Right.
about that you're getting on there. Cause I find with so many people's podcasts, when they're the ones talking, all of a sudden it shoots up because people want to listen to what you have to say too, and not always just your guests. Right. So yeah, it's always a fascinating metric
Yeah.
for me. But yeah. So pivoting a bit, what would you say is one of your biggest podcast fails?
I think one of my biggest podcast fails, and this is like being completely honest, is that I don't work ahead as much as I could. I don't. And so it's like I will wait, like I know what order they're coming out, and I just like to work on each one kind of around the time so I can kind of craft everything. And we can like get it out. So I probably work not as far ahead as I could. Um but it's not like I'm on vacation. Like I have two other businesses I'm running. So I don't miss the deadline, and I could probably work further ahead. And
Yeah.
so that does set up like some like tedious moments. That's okay.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way because you're in the
Well,
moment. I'm like, why would I do it 2 weeks ahead if I'm going to talk about it now? Like, I want to talk about it now when it's coming
yeah.
out. But yeah, I get it. Okay. The last question. If time or money were not a factor, what would be next for your podcast?
I would probably broadcast live from a Savannah Bananas game, and I would probably do um, a multi fan look at how like an inside engagement, or like so I would want to talk to someone in the front office. I would want to talk to one of the players
Yeah.
or a group of the players that's involved. I would love to talk to the people who have bought in and are Savannah Bananas fans and really kind of present, because I think they're one of the biggest case studies today of how a fan first culture drives organization and builds this beloved brand. And it's like it's clearly not an overnight success, right? They've been working so hard at this for so many years, and it's right there at that tipping point of like they're doing amazing things. So I would love to like go on tour with them or like dive into an organization and show like what an employee experience looks like, what the leadership point of view looks like, what the fan experience looks like, and interview like maybe even a couple different kinds of fans, because and just kind of be immersed and do like 5 episodes
Yeah.
like kind of from different points of view, because I think but if U2 wants me to come do that while they're at the Sphere, like I could do it for U2 too.
Yeah.
It's like that would be fine. So I just think that kind of like unpacking that within an organization that's doing this really well, like how many different angles and things could we pull out and do
Yeah.
these? And that's probably the journalist in me that has thought that would be a really neat way to do it. Because I did study as a broadcast journalist and as sports, wanted to be behind the sports desk and kind of bring this reporting out. And so I think that would tap back into some of those initial like storytelling, like how I learned to tell stories originally.
Yeah. And that must be just exactly what would totally get you to come alive, because it's studying fandom in like the heart of it. You're out there getting it done. And it's also podcasting, which is storytelling. And yeah, that would be
Yeah.
incredible.
Well,
I
I do
would
have
tune
an
in.
email out to them right now. I was personally connected by one of my
Yes.
upcoming guests. So maybe I need to revise that pitch. Maybe I just need to say like, I will meet you in such and such. And
Yeah.
here are the 4 episodes I'd like to do, because Carly said I could.
Yeah. I said so. So it must be true. Oh my gosh, Lauren, it's been incredible to have you on. And just want to ask if you have anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today on their podcasting journey and, how to build those fans for their show.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to make available to your listeners my own 5 ways that AI and automation has helped. So
Yes.
I'll make sure you have the link, Carly, but it's on my website, laurenteague.com, or you can just Google that, how 5 ways how AI and automation has helped me get every podcast out. Because I do have I have the SOPs, and I've written it all down. And I think that those tools that I found, the ways that I'm using them are really, really helpful. Like I've been told over and over again that just how useful that part of it is. And then the other thing just to emphasize is kind of going back to that, like fans, not followers, but you build fans by creating story in somebody else's experience. The story is the invitation for someone else to come join in and like start their own experience. And so if that's the case, like what story are you telling in your like within the podcast or how you're distributing the podcast that does bring someone in? So if it's using like some of the tools, like here's a quiz or here's a link or here's a poll that we put on the website, or it's something about the podcast specifically that is so good or worth talking about, right? Something that you got to listen to Brand New Fan Show because Lauren does this amazing thing, and you can scroll all the way to the end because she'll tell you when it's happening, right? And it's usually like 6 minutes before the show closes, and you just scroll there and get that piece. I mean, strategically, there's a reason why we don't clip that out and put it at the front.
Yeah.
And so, so giving your listeners something to grab it to not just hold on to and enjoy, but also that they're willing to tell a story about that, becomes the invitation for other people to lean in. And so I think that's, podcasting is definitely a long game.
Yeah.
And so, being into it for that time means that people who listen to you, no matter when they get there, have a chance to fall in love with what you're doing and what you are putting out into the world. And I think that is the coolest thing about it.
Yeah. No. Fall in love with what you're doing. I love that, because that's the thing. You're already there. You're in love with what you're doing. And if you can invite people into that space, it's you're going to see incredible results.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing your incredible story. I am excited to see where you go next with your show, with your business, and I will be watching this space. So thanks for coming on and sharing with all of my listeners today.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.